Okay, thank you, Dr. Carmen, for being on the show today. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, we're going to be talking with you about a lot of your work with the Pyramid Code. And, the Pyramid Code was a documentary I ran across a couple years ago. And I've been watching, I had watched John Anthony West's, who was featured in the Pyramid Code. I watched his documentary, but there was something about the Pyramid Code that, I don't know, it just grabbed me in some unique, strange way. And as a result, well, I guess not as a result, but you've been going to Egypt for, I think, 25 times now. Is that about right?
29.
29 times?
But who's counting?
Who's counting? Wow. So how many years ago did you start going there to Egypt?
1977 was the first time.
1977. And are you more fascinated or less fascinated now that you've gone 29 times?
That's a question I haven't been asked before. I guess more. I guess that's the simple answer, because it's much more complex, and there's always new places that I go to that I hadn't seen before. And yeah, I lived over there for 2.5 years.
So is it safe? A lot of people talk about how dangerous it is. Is it safe? I mean, you've been over there for so many times.
I have never gone where there isn't some kind of a government warning not to go because it's dangerous, and I have never felt in danger there at all, ever. And I see it's a big propaganda thing that's coming across the media. Don't go there, don't go there. I was even on Tahrir Square a year ago, and I've got footage when we were filming one year when the revolution was on, and it was a Friday, and I've got footage of people singing and dancing. That's what they were calling their revolution and their protest. I mean, and even during that first revolution, it was across from the radio and television building in Cairo, where I had to get a lot of permits. And so I knew what the lay of the land was. And there were people walking around with their children. You don't bring an infant that you carry on your shoulder to somewhere if it's dangerous. And that's what they were calling the protest. So wow. I see through that, and I think that there's a concerted effort to keep people out of Egypt. And it's working, like in the early days, people were willing to, go through that and trust it and come see for themselves. But now, with all of that stuff that has been reported, people are just like, forget it. It's too dangerous.
Yeah, I hear you.
But it isn't, okay? That's what we're told.
Yeah, we're told that. I mean, in 2001, I took a trip around the world for a year, and it was just the most amazing experience of my life. Took it around the world, and you find out when you start traveling that the world is very different than what you hear on the mainstream media. What you hear on the news and all these alleged bombings and attacks and all these things. And I went about 2 months after 9/11, and I was nervous, but when you start traveling, you realize, a lot of this stuff is just made up American stuff. I don't know. It's bizarre. But when you travel, you realize it's a lot safer. Why do you think that there's a concerted effort to get people to not go to Egypt? What do you think that's all about?
I call it CNN mentality, where what they want you to think is that the only place you're safe is on your own couch.
Yeah.
And now there's a worldwide travel alert that no American is supposed to go anywhere.
Right. Of course.
I mean, how is that realistic? Why? I mean, do we call a spade? I mean, isn't it all power and control? And the thing is that, like, I hear about Yemen. I haven't been there. Oh, it sounds dangerous. Well, I have no way of verifying that if I haven't been. And so I understand, like, for Egypt, I know it. I can phone somebody up right now and, find out that everything's business as usual, because I know it well, and I know lots of people there. But with other countries that you haven't been to, it's enough to scare you into staying home. So what do you think? They want everybody home.
So what do you think it is about the pyramids? I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, in the Pyramid Code, that documentary, I have to say, if you're watching this and you have not seen that documentary, it's just one of the most amazing documentaries I've ever seen on the pyramid. It's so amazing. But it sounds to me like there would be a concerted effort to not allow or I guess kind of scare people away from going to Egypt, because the more people they have poking around there, and learning and discovering new things. God knows what's going to come out. Do they know what they're hiding, or what do you think that's all about?
I appreciate your concern. It's all hidden in plain sight. And the thing is that many of us have been to Egypt and done a lot of exploring. I just came back from the Global Pyramid Conference in Chicago, which was just a brilliant event. And, we're continuing to make discoveries about the pyramids, even if we don't go to Egypt. And ironically, Egypt came to us at that thing. They had a golden pyramid house that we went to visit outside of Chicago, half an hour outside. There were camel rides in the parking lot, and then they had a reception with Egyptian music and belly dancing and Egyptian food. So, and the first person that I ran into, I'd met in Egypt. So, we're still going to continue examining our pictures and looking theoretically at what's going on and working with data that we've already gotten. So it's too late. They can't completely hide it, but the dating system is wrong. We're taught to think that there's pyramids in Mexico, in Egypt. Okay, where else? Well, there's pyramids in like 20 countries. Dr. Sam Osmanagic of the Bosnian Pyramid Project, he was and I'm making a world map now. I found 45 pyramids on Google Earth the other day in China.
45 just in China?
Well, they say there's 250, so I might need some help to find the rest of them, but they're in Mauritius, and they're in the Canary Islands, and they're in South Africa, and Antarctica, and Indonesia. I've just come back from Gunung Padang. There's more than one pyramid in Java. They're all over the world. And a lot of them are covered with earth and trees and vegetation, but that speaks to the idea that they're older than the last flood. So when the flood receded, the silt was on the pyramid, and then it grew things over the top. And so some of them have been excavated, and some of them are just hidden with little bits sticking out. And so that it already means we have to rewrite history, and mainstream doesn't want that. And so they keep repeating the propaganda that the pyramids were built in 2450 BC for the ego of the pharaoh, than their tombs. And even though they've never found a mummy, they still keep saying that they're tombs.
It's ridiculous, right?
There's built by slaves. They worshipped animals. They were obsessed with death. They didn't even have a word for death. Yeah. So, but that's not the only story in the world that we've been told that doesn't add up. And that's what these kinds of interviews are about, is how can we trust our own instincts and develop discernment so that we can tell the difference between propaganda and truth. Yeah, actually, I made a statement on a radio interview a couple of weeks ago, and somebody quoted it and put it on Facebook, and it went viral. And what I said was, the tragedy of our current culture is that the truth is an option.
That's true, yeah.
Make stuff up.
Just make stuff up and just keep repeating, and eventually everyone's going to believe it. Have you heard about that pyramid? I was just reading an article, I think it was about a year ago, about some sort of pyramid that they think has got some sort of reflective quality, and they're not sure what it's actually made out of. But you probably know where about this. But it was found at the bottom of the ocean off the coast of Florida, somewhat near the Bermuda Triangle. Have you heard about that?
I think north of Cuba.
Is that what it was?
I just filmed at the Bermuda Triangle, so yeah, I've heard about that. But it's if it's the story that I'm thinking of, it was too deep for divers to go down there, and so they had to send a submersible camera down. So that's all they've got. No one's been down there to see it themselves. So
a lot of people have said that, the pyramids, so many people have so many different ideas as to where they came from, why they're there. One of the theories that just comes to mind, that there's a million of them, but one of them that comes to mind is to balance out the wobble of the earth, and to sort of synchronize the earth and make it so that it doesn't wobble when it spins. They're strategically placed all around the world in order to prevent that. What do you think about that idea?
I'm warming up to it quite nicely. One thing that's true, if you put a knitting needle through the top of the Great Pyramid, go through the center of the globe, you come out at Haleakala, which is a volcano. So there's been all kinds of relationships between the heaviness of the pyramid and a heavy volcano on the other side, and that there's something about the molten action inside the planet and the weight that's doing something. My understanding is it's not so much about the wobble, but it's about the magnetic poles. And that there were 3 different disasters in Atlantis, and the first one in 58,000 years ago, not BC, 58,000 years ago, was a magnetic shift. And it makes sense when you look at the timing and some of the dating that's coming from these older pyramids, that there could have been a worldwide concerted effort to do something that would help to stabilize the magnetic poles.
So the magnetic poles. So, wow, I wonder, how did they even know that there was such a thing? I mean, these people, I oftentimes think about the culture and the society at that time, getting into their heads and getting into their mindset is got to be one of the most fascinating things. Because at the very, very least, in my mind, if you have a society and a culture that is just building these pyramids as slaves like we were all taught in school, at the very least, how do you coerce hundreds of thousands of people to work their entire lives to build, to focus on a singular task for their entire life, giving up everything that they wanted to do? Even, I don't even believe that, but even if that were the case, that would be impossible to do today, just to get people to work on a singular task like that.
Okay, none of what we're told about ancient history really makes sense. I remember feeling really sick in history class and was going, no, that's not.
I remember that too.
Yeah, okay. So they're trying to, but the thing is that there's links to how, because we're the ones who are enslaved now. And so if they say that the Anunnaki and, Nephilim, all that stuff, that they came here and enslaved us so that we dig gold, the implication is that we're not enslaved now. There's a hidden hand now in terms of what we're being taught and how we are enslaved. So the ancients were brilliant. We're told that we're the smartest we've ever been. And I've got serious concerns about, people's memory loss and, lack of creativity. And I think that people are becoming more and more distracted and less, like I said, creative. So I think we're really in trouble. We're not the smartest we've ever been. I mean, we'd stop hurting the planet if we were being smart. So I attribute all of this to patriarchal ways of being and thinking. And the agenda of the patriarchy has been to erase evidence of everything other than itself. So everything else, is the more balanced, intelligent, connected, cross-disciplinary, civilized in a way that's peaceful. So we've got it wrong in terms of, so let's just draw a line, a firewall to the mainstream media and what they're trying to tell us in school and all of that, and start over again and look from a different perspective. And there's plenty of stuff on YouTube that will show you unified writing that's been found all over the world. We know that Atlantis was a worldwide seafaring culture. There's lots of things, and they all these civilizations, the Mayans, the Egyptians, the Vedic Indians, the Chinese, and the Sumerians, they all had knowledge of astronomy, high-level mathematics, all kinds of things that they understood, sky-ground correlations. They understood how energy worked. They have similarities. And we want to overlook that because they have, different locations. We're the ones who are dividing the earth up into all these different countries and regions and ethnic groups and everything else. So there was a unified field. And I think about the third-party hypothesis that perhaps all of the cultures that I mentioned would have all had similar ancestors. And what does that mean? But there's been some incredible finds lately that aren't announced to the public, but I've been privy to see some pictures of these places. And I know I'm connected. Anyway, so there's been a stash from Amarna. That's my speculation. It very much looks like the Amarna period, and there's Akhenaten is clearly in there, and Amenhotep III, of all these gold statues that were found. And they picked across it's gold, it's wooden, they're wooden statues with gold leaf over the top. So they got a little piece of wood under the gold and had it dated, and it comes out at 15,000 years ago. Well, that means that they inherited the treasures because Nefertiti and Akhenaten were in about 1350 BC, something like that. So we really need to rewrite all this. There's 3 levels of civilization that are represented at Gunung Padang in Java. We've just been I guess I want to say our true heritage has been stolen from us, but it's there. And now you can find images and things, the devices that they had, and piece by piece, the story's coming back together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you can see the depictions of all these weird devices, the Ankh and all these tools, and then, but I'm curious, how long do you think the current paradigm in Egypt, the people who are sort of blocking people doing real research on the pyramids, how long are they going to be able to continue to tell people that these things are 2,500 years old and they're built by slaves? I mean, is that going to exist forever, do you think?
Listen, we've had 5,000 years of the wrong story. I mean, they can continue, but the thing is that I think the bigger challenge is, can we wake up and start telling another story? And that's what I think these interviews are about. Mm-hmm. So, I've been citing that we've got a lot of problems in the world, but there's an additional problem. There's a whole lot of people that don't realize it. Mm-hmm. So that's two problems. The one's all the, death and destruction and all the hidden things and lack of transparency. And then there's all these people who think that everything's fine. Mm-hmm. and it isn't. So, that those traditional stories are going to last for the people who go as tourists and listen and go, okay. Because there's all kinds of things they tell us that don't even make sense. But many people don't continue to listen with their being. So, we can use ourselves like human divining rods, like, mm-hmm. Muscle testing, that sort of thing. And if, either we move towards something and we feel warm and good about it, or we move away from it and go, no, there's something wrong with that. So mm-hmm. we need to put ourselves into the equation. Otherwise, we're just going to be little belief machines. Mm-hmm. And that's not good enough.
Yeah, I think that what's happening in today's world, I think, is really promising, because eventually the people that are the gatekeepers of our governments, of our media, of our corporations, and places that protect Egypt and these types of things from people doing real research, eventually those people are going to be staffed by people that have never grown up without the internet. And it's hard to live in a world like today where you have so much access to this kind of knowledge. You have access to it. It's a click away on YouTube. You can do all this research. And eventually, in 30 or 40 years, the people that are the gatekeepers are going to never have been born, never have been alive without a smartphone. So these people, I'm assuming, are going to be a little bit more awake. And hopefully we keep moving in that direction with a podcast like this. And you do a ton of shows with all kinds of amazing people, interviewing you. So I'm hoping that with the advent of the internet and social media and interviews like this, people start waking up. And I think eventually it's going to just be like a snowball effect. Yeah.
And it's people know what's going on more and more. Now, once you start to wake up and question, that's the first step. Wait, that doesn't make any sense. Let me see. Once you start to wake up and you go, aha, that was a false flag event. Aha, that was staged. Yep. You don't really go back and put your head under the pillow again. No. You keep looking and look, oh, no, there's another example. There's another example. And so once there's a pinprick into this, I think that it becomes, bigger and bigger and bigger, and then we poke our heads up and see that it's a whole different world than we've been told.
Yeah. For me, I got interested in this in the mid '90s, and I was reading some Graham Hancock books and things like that. And I had a friend of mine who was really interested in this kind of stuff. And it's interesting because once you realize that we've been lied to about one thing, you can start looking at every other area of your life: holistic health, nutrition. Everything that we're been told is most likely the opposite is the truth. And I remember sitting in class when I was in fifth or sixth grade, and I remember that I can sit down and I can look at the textbook and I could almost redraw the picture, those little pictures they put in textbooks of children, of the slaves pulling with all these ropes, like 30 or 40 of these people pulling the ropes of these stones. And I remember when I was in sixth grade thinking, there is no way. There's no possible way they could do this. And I heard someone saying just recently that according to one of the estimations that, it would take them 600 years to build a pyramid. There's 2.3 million stones all the way up to 60 tons each that are, like you said in the Pyramid Code documentary, that sometimes you can't even put a razor blade through these things. It's just, there's no way. And the other thing about it too that's fascinating is that the quarry, from what I understand, and now correct me if I'm wrong, to the Great Pyramid is about 500 miles away. So for me, I live in Southern California. We go up to Tahoe every year, which is sort of, I don't know, maybe central to Northern California. It takes us like 8 hours to drive that. And I think that's roughly 500 miles. How are they going to set, quarry, and position each one of those stones that far away? It makes no sense at all.
That's correct. So I've started to think, and I'm comfortable with this, that it's geopolymers. Some stones were carved, but many of them were poured. And once something has hardened into place, it's very difficult to see if it's a geopolymer granite or if it's a real granite. Mm-hmm. So that starts to make sense. And they're building new pyramids in Russia, actually, using this technique. So Joseph Davidovich is the one that scientifically demonstrated how this is true. But in my research in Egypt, I've seen that in many of the temple walls, there's the structure of the temple, there's the pillars themselves, and then in some places, the cement over the top has fallen off, and you can see that. And there's also what I call innies and outies. So some of the things are carved in, and some of them are like Fimo, where it's like the fresco is sticking out.
Okay.
And so all of that would be facilitated if the stones were poured, A. And B, after a lot of, cross-correlating and looking, I actually found a couple of places where if it had been a mold, they used the same mold at a different temple. Wow. But most of Egypt, most of those temples, they have like endless stories on the walls that are unique because they're really trying to give us, clues as to who they were. Uh-huh. The Egyptian, and I've often said this. I mean, I think reincarnation is, it was outlawed in 323 AD by Emperor Constantine. They want us to think we only live once. Well, okay, if you drop that idea, then, we had past lives too. And I don't think anybody really pursues things or goes places unless they are already there. So, mm-hmm. I mean, I'm quite comfortable with the idea that I've had at least 3 incarnations in Egypt. Mm-hmm. So we would have had future vision. We were psychic. It was just normal, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we knew that the world was going to turn into a bloodbath of corruption and darkness, and we were planning those temples, what would we leave for ourselves to trigger us into remembering what they were doing? And I say that's the frescoes, that's the body postures, the instruments, the processes that you see. And it's possible to decipher it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about that theory? Well, I'm not sure. I got so much information. I can't remember if this was in the Pyramid Code or not, but of the pyramids being built from the top down?
Well, it's not logical. Now, how is that possible?
I know, right?
That's not a better theory. And, and that the spaceships did it and everything. That's just too easy. Aliens, yeah. They did it.
Yeah.
The Anunnaki, they did it. Yeah, okay, but when and how many of them and in what way? It's just too easy to say, well, flat Earth, okay,
Yeah.
So no, I don't think it could have been built by the top down. But the way it was done has to have involved anti-gravity in some way.
It has to have, right? There's no other way. I mean, unless there were beings like I've heard before that were 60, 70 feet tall and everyone was that big and they could carry these stones. But even still, if it takes 8 hours to drive 500, 600 miles, it's still going to take you forever to be able to create these pyramids, even if people are massively huge and there's giants on the earth and all of that, right?
Well, yes, but giants could be 7 feet tall, 12, 15, 25. You see all kinds of misinformation about giants online, uh-huh. where they'll have a human standing beside a being and the human's as tall as the ear uh-huh. of the giant. I think we've got no evidence of that. And we know that a lot of bones from giants have been found in North America and that they've been taken to the Smithsonian and then put on a boat and dumped in the ocean. Mm-hmm. And so there's been a huge thing to say that no, we didn't have giants, and yet there's legends of them and bones are being found. And, there's loads and loads of distended skulls from giant beings and bones that are being found in various places. And I've been asked to go and film some in South America. So I don't think they were 70 feet high. They may have been bigger than us. Okay, so it's all there. It's there. It's just that it's hard to put the story back together if you keep taking the evidence and hiding it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, regardless of how you slice it, the story we've been told is just not true at all, and any logical person can see that. Now, what do you think about the idea that Egyptians were mainly handed down this technology, and they weren't actually the ones that built the pyramids, but it was some greater civilization that came before them, and people say as time goes on, the stones get smaller and knowledge gets lost. What do you think about all that?
Oh, that's absolutely true. So the best technology is the oldest.
It's the oldest.
And one of the things about Egypt is that we look to dynastic Egypt, which started in 3113 BC, which parallels the Mayan calendar. But dynastic Egypt is patriarchal Egypt. And so all of the pre-dynastic material has also kind of been shoved into obscurity. So, the modern Egyptians who speak Arabic are not the race that put the pyramids and the temples there. So there's been a lot of distortion on that. But I also think that the pyramids and the temples are also two different time frames.
The pyramids and the temples. How many temples are there? I guess there's hundreds, right?
Yeah, loads of temples. I mean, there's, 15 that are famous on the tourist circuit, and they are close to the Nile. And then there's some that are, and this is in the pyramid code, like Dendera and Abydos, that are quite a bit further from the Nile, which simply speaks to their antiquity, right? Because the Nile would have migrated, and so they would have been older. But both those temples have temples that are underneath them. And so, and at Abydos, they're beside each other. So the Assyrians much lower, and again, much more megalithic. In Dendera, there are crypts below, and there's places where you can see the temple pillars from the lower level. And so they're just much, much older. So yeah, there's lots to be said about dating and what was there before and what's been built on top of and on top of. But we're getting more comfortable now thinking about even the Bosnian pyramid. I saw the dating certificate. They found a piece of leaf that had blown in when they were constructing between the third and fourth course of the Pyramid of the Sun. And it dated to 38,000 years ago. Gunung Padang, they're dating it at 26,000 years ago. And so I think that these pyramids are far older than is commonly being said. But you get a bunch of pyramid researchers together like we were in Chicago, and we're all talking much, much older dates.
So you're talking about the, what is that called? The precession of the equinox, and, times going far back, like 50,000 years kind of thing, or more?
Or more. And so the precession of the equinoxes is roughly 26,000 years. And so in Atlantis, it had time to go around a bunch of times. So, I think that there's a lot to be said about, and my new project is the New Atlantis. And there's a lot of material that has been disconnected that I'm going to reconnect here in this series. And so there were 3 major disasters in Atlantis, and that has been documented in ancient texts. And I always triangulate information that I find so it can be brought down through mythology, or there's geological things that you can verify. So you're not just telling a story, I'm right because I said so, but giving some concrete evidence that's real of how this worked.
Right.
So if the disaster that began the pyramid building effort happened 58,000 years ago, it would stand to reason that some of those pyramids are close to that age.
Right. Because the people have done the research on the Sphinx and the water lines, that obviously there must have been some sort of rainfall and a different sort of topography there with the climate and everything. You mentioned the flood a while ago. I know obviously in the Bible it talks about the flood. Is the flood mentioned, or is a flood or any sort of catastrophe like that mentioned? I've heard it's mentioned in other cultures around the world. How does that play into all of this, do you think? I mean, because, people, Christians will say, oh, the flood was, 4,000 years ago or some crazy thing like that. But was there really a flood? Like, did all this stuff really happen, do you think?
Well, how many floods? And there's something about the Bible wanting us to think we're 5,000 or 6,000 years old, and nothing is allowed to be dated older than 6,000 years in South America, even if it is older. And so, there's, the paradigm is trying to hold that story together. But there's more than one world flood. Now it's coming out that some 13,667 years ago, that there was a major catastrophe that caused a worldwide flood. But what about before that and before that and before that? So yes, of course, and there's watermarks on things, but even that Sphinx, redating of the Sphinx, that was terribly exciting for us in the 80s when all that happened. Mm-hmm. And they demonstrated that there would have been a lot of rainfall and that sort of thing. But then there's more information coming out now, researchers that are saying it could be as old as 450,000 years, and that is absolutely earth-shattering, but they're presenting at these scientific conferences, and they're looking at the idea that there could have been a lake at the foot of the Sphinx that went all the way down to where Hawara is. So
oh my gosh,
we got to keep digging and digging and digging and see that it's layers upon layers upon layers. And if you have a minimum of 3 Earth catastrophes, and I'm probably, it's probably going to find out that there's more, and that shakes everything down. And then they're going to say, well, if they had diamond drill bits, find me the diamond. Well, if we dropped a diamond in my lawn here, we'd have a hard time finding it, even if we were standing there when we dropped it. Mm-hmm. Like you put 3 world floods on it, and you want to maybe have the proof of something that was carved with a diamond bit, but not the diamond itself. So, we really are very mixed up in terms of how we do research. I heard a study yesterday actually that they wanted to replicate. I've taught quantitative research methods to graduate students, so I understand how this stuff works.
Right.
But basically, a proper research study is supposed to be reproducible. That you put your methodology, you put your research question, you say the data, you show how you did the statistical analysis, and the point is if someone else came along and took a sample of grade 3 students and ran the same tests and did the same process, that they would end up with the same results. And the other, that's reliability. Mm-hmm. And they found that 60% of the studies that they went to replicate didn't add up and didn't have the same results.
No way, 60%?
60%. Yeah, and then there's the 10-minute study where a corporation will go to a scientist who's working for a university and say, okay, I'm going to ask you to write a paper that says that this product does this, this, and this, and there's no side effects. And I'll give you $250,000. And if you don't, I'll kidnap your kids and break your wife's kneecaps. What do you say?
Oh my God.
Oh, okay, I'll say that's right. Give me the $250,000. And that's how research is done now.
Wow.
It's just, it's, if you really start digging in to find out how we ended up, so confused and disconnected from extreme antiquity and from the truth about our past, it's just amazing, the things you'll find. And the other thing, I'm just looking at a picture of Stonehenge on my desktop here. They date Stonehenge to a certain date, and then archaeologists, then they back it up, and then, a couple of years later, they back it up some more, but we come out, it's true, we know, it's like a lawsuit where they have to find somebody who's guilty and lock them up and close the case. Mm-hmm. Whether they're right or not, that doesn't come into play. And so we end up talking like that. This is the age, this is who built it. We don't know that. It's way too precise. Mm-hmm. And we also don't know what happened to it after it was built. So I always say the last time I painted my house is not the age of my house. It's the last time I did work on it.
Right. Yeah, man, it is so just bizarre to me to have these people tell us that they know what really happened. I mean, there's just no, these beings or these creatures or the civilization or whoever it is that built these ancient structures, to me, have got to be probably the most fascinating culture, the fascinating ideas behind why they did what they did, and the reason for what they did. It blows my mind. And for us to come into our culture today thinking that we're the most technologically advanced culture, advanced civilization that's ever lived, it's the height of arrogance, isn't it?
It's the height of arrogance. Thank you very much. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. But the other thing is that, there's these structures are multidimensional. They're connected to astronomy and planetary systems. And I've demonstrated, and this will be in the new Atlantis, the sky-ground correlation for the pyramid fields in Egypt, the Band of Peace.
Uh-huh.
And how these planetary systems, like I worked with Starry Night Pro for months to figure this out. And this configuration is connected to the extragalactic grid, which is connected to the center of the galaxy that the Mayans knew about. And this juxtaposition that locks in the pyramid fields that look like they're just scattered holds together all the way back to 50,000 BC. Holds together now and goes into the future to 13,000 some AD, and then it breaks apart. And I'm like, what? What's that?
Well,
but anyway, the long and short of it is that they were astronomical markers. They're multidimensional machines. They're things that can help increase consciousness, practice out-of-body experiences. All kinds of things can happen with what's going on with the technology. Here's a little story for you. I mentioned that we went to the Golden Pyramid House a half an hour outside of Chicago. And this family decided they were going to get the dimensions of the Great Pyramid and build their house in that shape. So it's 7 stories high, and they live there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really neat.
Oh, that's cool.
But when they finished the pyramid, it surrounded itself in a sacred lake. And then they decided they wanted to do some restoration on the exterior of the pyramid, so they put a scaffolding and a tent over the top of it. And the wind caught it and smashed 10 feet up of one side of the pyramid and made a hole in it. And all the water drained out of the lake. And then they repaired the pyramid and made it intact, and all the water came back. It was acting like a pump. Still is.
Oh my goodness, really?
I know. And this is I was there. I saw it. I've got footage of it.
Wow. So
so they're pumping mineral water that's, charged, and they've done some tests on the water, and they've made pyramid-shaped bottles with a gold top on them, and they're selling pyramid water in pyramid bottles.
Oh my gosh, how funny. Well, there is something to the shape. I mean, there's obviously like the sacred geometry aspect of all of this, and the shape that maybe the shape of the pyramid is somehow coalescing the energetic or the telluric forces that exist, maybe from the ley lines or God knows where. Maybe it's causing, energy, and maybe it's causing some sort of bending of space-time or something to happen around these sacred shapes. Who knows? I think that with the pyramids, a lot of people like to say, oh, well, they were built for, as tombs, or, oh, they were built for as energy grids or to balance out the earth. There's probably hundreds of reasons why, and they probably have hundreds of functions, wouldn't you think?
Well, many functions, certainly not tombs.
Uh-huh.
In China, they found some bodies buried in pyramids, so it's not. But in Egypt, they've never found it. They're not tombs. They're definitely energy devices.
Well, in Egypt,
there's been a lot of measurements done on the Bosnian pyramid. Dr. Samos Manigic has done a wonderful, wonderful job in the past 9 years of inviting cross-disciplinary researchers to come there with their instrumentation, measure things. So there's a huge beam of energy coming off the top of the Pyramid of the Sun, and they've never opened it yet. They've found, through a high-definition space archaeology technique, the entrance to the tunnel system, and they've been excavating in there for 9 years, and they're making some good progress. But the pyramid itself is like 2 kilometers away, something like that, and the tunnel system is elaborate. They call it a labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
But they've done measurements outside the pyramid with devices that show that the farther away you are from the apex of the pyramid, the stronger the energy is, and it could be actually transmitting from a farther place. And all the pyramids have water tunnels underneath, and precisely placed chambers. There's lots of different characteristics in these pyramids that show that they're extremely complex. It's not just the pyramid shape. I mean, you can take a pyramid. They had somebody at the conference with a pyramid shaped hat, and it was made out of paper. And they took two oranges and they put one outside the pyramid and one inside the pyramid without refrigerating. And the one outside, was all mush and deteriorating in a week, and the other one lasted a month. And they've done all kinds of things like that, sharpening razor blades. I had a game myself where I put my dead batteries from my Walkman or my Discman in the olden days in my pockets and wear the coat into the pyramid, and I'd come back and use the batteries again.
Really?
They used to last 12 hours, and after they went in the pyramid, they lasted 6 hours, every one of them.
So they would last 12 hours total, and then when they're completely dead, you put them in the pyramid, and then they would sort of last 6 more hours.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Oh, and I've had all kinds of people, have funny things happen with the batteries in their camera, and it would charge up by itself in the pyramid.
So the Bosnian pyramid, is that the pyramid that's sort of covered in in trees and things like that? It's like a lot of overgrowth on that thing, right?
Well, yes, and the thing is that the trees are all going to be different heights. So if you were able to shave them even with some kind of helicopter device, you would see that it's absolutely a straight-sided pyramid. But they've done some excavation on the outside of it. I mean, if you start looking, first of all, mainstream media won't admit that there's anything to the Bosnian pyramid. But I mean, I've been following Dr. Sam's work, and he just gave me his book, and I just finished reading it. So he's got all kinds of studies that have been done. I even spoke there at the Hidden Mysteries Conference and was exposed to a lot of the year of scientific research that people have been doing there. So if you say there's nothing to it, it only means you haven't looked.
Right.
And so, but in the tunnel system, I mean, they have to excavate because they were filled with rubble. They're finding all kinds of things that come from the matriarchal times, 40,000 years ago. So, I've been studying the sacred feminine for decades, and there's something about pyramid energy and matriarchal cultures that come together at the Bosnian pyramids. It's absolutely astounding what's down there and how it's man-made. It's obviously man-made. Mm-hmm. So, and there's no EMFs or radiation down there. It's the healthiest place. I mean, we're just getting radiated here, something terrible. And so it's actually very healthy to be down there.
Yeah, I know. In the Pyramid Code, you do a lot of covering of the matriarchal societies, and I think that's really important because it seems as though Egypt was very much like that, wasn't it? Matriarchal.
Yes, but we look through our own eyes. And the thing is matriarchal cultures are certainly all over the place. I mean, there's finds in Turkey from the Amazons from 42,000 years ago, and Katal Hayuk, the fertility goddesses, and everything you've got on Malta. And in Malta, you're not allowed to use the G word for goddess. So, I mean, this has really been thorough, that, man dominated and power over and, everything is just looking through patriarchal lenses. But I think we're going to come to see the last 5,000 years as the patriarchal hiccup. And some of these new finds of artifacts they're resplendent with goddess-centered things, beautiful jewels and angels, and not a single arrowhead or weapon of any description. And so the older finds are deeper, perhaps, or more obscure, and we're finding that it comes from a completely different culture. So all we do is look through patriarchal lenses and project what we think onto the past, and it comes up wrong because of that.
Yeah, and there's an interesting verse in the book of Genesis in the Bible where it talks about obviously everyone knows about the Tower of Babel story and all of that, but there's an interesting verse that says in the days I'm going off memory here of like 10 years ago, but something like in the days of Peleg the earth was divided. And I often wonder, was the earth, is that referencing Pangea? And at the time, during, maybe 50,000, 100,000 of years ago, was the Earth more connected in terms of geology, where people would be able to cross-pollinate, and Mexican or Mayan cultures would be able to interact with Egyptian cultures? Because it appears to me like there's some sort of definite knowledge a high level knowledge that all ancient cultures had, and it almost seems like they shared it in some weird, strange way, right?
Yes, I think that was a worldwide seafaring culture, and for sure, if you look at Pangea and different really old geological things, you'll see that all the continents were stuck together at a different time. And there's maps that have been found on stone that Klaus Donna shows in his presentations. And then there's the Ica stones of Dr. Henvier Cambrera, who I met, who is no longer with us. And they've got all kinds of images of the map of the world when everything was put together, and man riding on dinosaurs and brain transplant operations. There's 13,000 of these stones, and he amassed 11,000 of them. And it's like a stone library of medical techniques and geology and, you know, all kinds of different things. And so, you know, there are records and there are things pointing to things having been very different a long time ago. But I think instead of thinking that the Mayans mated with the Sumerians, I think that it may be easier to think of it as a third party that fed all of these different groups or divided into these different groups and went around the world. So, for example, if we were going to do that now, we could take all the people who do hip hop and their style and the kind of music and send them off to colonize one corner. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, all of the rest of us that, you know, the ballerinas go over there, the firemen go over there. And so these groups would have divided and look different and have a different style, but they're all coming from the same source. And then later it got more and more distorted. But the whole idea of the Tower of Babel, and even where the location of this is, close to Göbekli Tepe and all these different places that, again, have strong signs of matriarchal cultures, was that if we had been unified, and there is unified writing found all over the place. Again, on my desktop, I'm looking at about 10 pictures of that writing, and it's almost runic. And they found it in the tunnels, one example of it, in the tunnels of the Bosnian pyramids. But we would have been unified. But the idea of Babel and the word Babel, the whole thing was about dividing us into different language groups, dividing us so that we could, you know, divide and conquer and not feel unified as one humanity. And that's, you know, again, a source of many of our problems that they keep on showing, you know, pitting one group against another and giving guns to both sides and leaving and letting everybody fight it out. So that, you know, points to a time when we would have been severely divided by design, by whoever, the mm-hmm. powers that be. Somehow that was the beginning of many of our problems, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know in the Bible it talks about how God in the days of Babel, you know, switched everybody's languages up so they couldn't communicate with one another. You know, regardless of whether or not that's true, the idea still seems to remain, is that somehow we got divided, and like you said, you know, when we can divide people and get them to realize they're different, there's such a thing as man and woman, black and white, and all these different stereotypes that we put labels on people and then fight those labels. That's how you start getting people sort of distracted and sick and in debt and unable to really look at what's really going on in the world, which is, you know, the fact that we've been lied to about just about everything. You know, I find these structures around the world just completely fascinating. It's not just Egypt. It's also, you know, what are those stones on the island off of Peru? What is that called? Those big stones, face statues that are Easter Island and all of that. It's just, it blows my mind what these ancient cultures were all about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've been to Easter Island too after they finished putting the statues back, because there was a big tsunami that knocked them all over, and they took photographs. They had a picture of when it had been finished and standing, and then they took photographs, and it took them 2 years to figure out how to put the thing back together and 2 years to stand the thing back up.
Wow.
Well, you know, and we don't have the energy, the technology to take the pyramids down. So I mean, it's megalithic, it's worldwide. It's all fascinating, and I think it's all connected, and that these cultures did share something, and that's why we find similarities in a lot of these sites. And also, the location of them is connected. Like I'm working with my animation team to look at how the longitudes are connected and how these sites are sacred geometry can measure where they are and how they end up. And so, I mean, the fact that they're connected in a systematic way is equally fascinating. I mean, the farther you dig in this, the more fascinating it becomes, which brings us round back to the first question you asked me.
Right. So what's this work you're doing with Atlantis? Because that goes hand in hand with all of this ancient civilization stuff. What's that primarily about?
Well, it's the sequel to the Pyramid Code, so it's a similar style, and it's 5 episodes, like the Pyramid Code is. And I'm looking at ties to this worldwide seafaring culture, the unified writing, the third-party hypothesis, things that I've been talking about now will be demonstrated, not just talked about, but you'll be able to see through. I've got footage from 11 countries. And underwater footage, aerial footage, balloon, hot air balloon, lots and lots of interesting things. So I'm looking at the science, working somewhat with Valery Uvarov's work from his book, The Pyramids. He's in St. Petersburg, about quartz under pressure and what really makes pyramid energy and what they would have been used for. And so looking at legends about Atlantis, ancient texts, that there's one in particular that talks about when the head of the crab, the heart of the, how's this go? The head of the crab hits the heart of the lion, which basically is saying that the constellation of Leo and Cancer collided. Well, how do you do that because like if you look at the globe, we've got the northern hemisphere sky, and from the southern hemisphere you see the other part, but the part that goes around the middle is actually the zodiac. And the precession of the equinoxes is how long it takes to make a full circle through 2,000 year astrological signs. Well, this legend's saying that 2 signs crashed into each other. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that the Earth was no doubt hit by an asteroid that knocked the axis of the Earth over, and then we had to start recounting things. So all of that, like what happened to us? When did it happen? And what does it mean? Because pretty much everything about Atlantis has all been, mixed up and fantasized and demonized and all that. So they're saying that they were doing experiments between animals and humans, and they were so evil that God sent the flood to fix it. Well, if you don't think we got enough evil and crazy experiments going on now, if that's causative of a flood, then we're long overdue, wouldn't you say? But
yeah.
But that means if it was 13,000 years ago, that's half a precessional cycle ago. So if we're at the bottom of the dark here, just starting to head up the other side, if it's not too late, then they would have been in their golden age then. So, where's the logic and the Pyramid Code, I think, did a lot for people understanding going back further in time.
Right.
Because we've been locked into this 6,000 year thing, and then that makes it impossible to understand. It's almost impossible to understand anyway, but if you're locked into just the last little bit, you don't have the mind map to take you further back.
Right.
And so, it's going to concretize and show us a little bit more about how these things fit together. But I've also got some really fabulous stuff about Ed Leeds Scallion.
Oh, yes.
From Coral Castle, I have original 16 millimeter footage of him at the site, not working, but definitely visiting, and 8.5 by 11 black and white pictures that he took with a Brownie camera and the original selfies. and then there's a gentleman named James Ernest Brown who wrote a book called Electric Ancient Egyptians, and he deciphered what Leeds Scallion did. So part of the footage is of Coral Castle and explaining how he was able to move these megalithic stones, some stones taller than Stonehenge, some stones bigger than in the Great Pyramid, and he moved them by himself, cut them, placed them, and then took the whole thing and got it onto a flatbed truck and moved it to another location and unloaded the truck by himself. So he was, he really understood the secrets of anti-gravity and how to make work with he said if there was a I have his notes and there's a typed out from an original typewriter manuscript, and somehow James has let me have this stuff, which is tremendous. And he said if there was a word called magnicity, he would be happy with it. But even what we say about electricity and magnetism isn't complete, and that's why we can't figure things out. That's one of the things we can't figure out. but they have to work in the context of each other. And so then James is looking at frescoes in Egypt and comparing them to what Lead Scallion was doing. And I say he's cracked the case.
Wow. So Lead Scallion, to me, the two most modern, fascinating people have got to be Lead Scallion and Nikola Tesla. And somehow these two guys were somehow able to figure out something. And wasn't it Lead Scallion who said that he knew how they built the pyramids in Egypt?
Well,
something like that.
Because he always worked in secret and at night, mostly at night, alone, maybe not in secret, but alone. Many people said that he understood how the pyramids were built in order to apply that technology to his coral castle. He could have said that. I didn't see that in any of the notes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because people, apparently there's legend of him, you probably know this, of kids talking or say they secretly saw him in the middle of the night moving these huge blocks like balloons and things like that. It seems to me, I mean, it doesn't, his size is sort of irrelevant to me because they say he was about 5 feet tall and I don't know, 120 pounds or something like that. But, you know, even if he was 7 feet tall and 250 pounds, he's not moving, 20, 30 ton block stones by himself. Doesn't matter how tall you are. So, but his size does go to show that, you know, he was doing something fascinating. But I suspect, I think it's weird. I kind of have this idea that, you know, I read this book a while back by Carolyn Mace, I think you could say her name, called Sacred Contracts. And she talks about how when we come into this life, we drink from the river of forgetfulness. So we forget everything that we knew prior to coming into our current incarnation. And I wonder if it's possible. Why can't there be more people like Ed Lead Scallion or Nikola Tesla? If we were, if we have all knowledge within us, it seems like somehow we could. I don't know. Maybe it's just a wild aspiration, but it seems like we could figure out intuitively how they did these things. I don't know.
Well, I think we are connected to our intuition, but we're talked out of it. Like school is basically a socialization process so that we will not connect to ourselves. So we'll be externally oriented and we'll do what they want us to do. And so I think that Nikola Tesla and Ed Lead Scallion somehow circumvented that whole thing and were geniuses despite what the system was doing, right? But they were also driven into obscurity and, stolen from and everything else. So we have the same DNA that the ancients had. And yes, but look, if JP Morgan and all that hadn't attacked Nikola Tesla and driven him into obscurity, we wouldn't have to pay for utilities and we would have wireless technology that isn't damaging to us. And think about how much money we've been given to utilities, taxes, insurance, and interest, which is all fake and phony, right?
Oh, and also explosion energy, which you talk about on the Pyramid Code. If everything was implosion, that would change the entire world.
Yes, and we have the technology, but it's being blocked at the patent office. Like, if the powers that pretend would take the stick out of the spokes, Mother Earth could start healing again, and we could start, thawing out and finding our extrasensory perception and everything else. But we're being attacked. And it sounds crazy because there's a whole bunch of people who don't think that or don't know that or can't imagine that the government would do anything to hurt us. And if you start scratching below the surface here, you're going to find that there's, you know it, I know, and that's the thing too. Having been on the speaker circuit for 30 years and done so many interviews,
I know.
I'm getting, I'm speaking to people who are well informed, such as yourself, and there's a tipping point that I think we've reached where people can't take it anymore. The interviewers themselves are like, what's going on? Why don't we know more? How come we can't figure this out? What's the problem here?
Right.
And there's a certain, I call it systemic distress. And everywhere we look, there's kids are getting cancer younger, dogs are dying and they go to the vet and they're full of cancer. And all this stuff is just hitting people so hard and from so many different directions that, as I'm saying, even the interviewers are having a hard time wrapping themselves around it. And that's what, it's not same old where we just do a little research and figure things out. Mm-hmm. It's like the frog in the boiling water. It's reaching a crisis point where people are frantic. And at the end of Dr. Sam's presentation, he's talking about getting away from radiation, and he lives off the grid in Croatia, and the rest of the time he's working down under the tunnels in Bosnia.
Wow.
And the last slide he had with somebody holding, a whole group of people holding their ears and screaming, and he says that if we don't change our ways, we're all going to end up being aggressive zombies, is what he said. And he left us with that picture, and it just like imprinted in my brain. It's like, this is serious. This is serious. Like, to be distracted consumers and spectators is what the media is turning us into, is kind of dangerous.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would have to say it's completely dangerous too, because it keeps people sick and debt, and keeps them spinning their wheels and unable to really focus on anything that's going on. And the thing that the most fascinating part about the work that you do, and the work that I feel like I do on our other website, which is Alternative Health Podcast, all of these things are doorways. Like, they always say, oh, marijuana is the doorway drug to other drugs or whatever. But these issues are doorways to the entire platform and the entire foundation of how we view life and what we believe. And it affects history, it affects spirituality, it affects religion, it affects free energy and coal, and it affects everything that we do on this world. So it's not just as simple as, looking at the pyramids and thinking something more is going on, but when you realize that what we've been told about the pyramids is just not true, then we realize, okay, either they lied to us unknowingly, they just didn't know any better, so they had to tell us something, or there's a deliberate agenda for them to lie to us because they're covering something up. And if that's the case, then you got a whole worldview now that has to change. And these types of issues, I think, are really important for helping act as doorways for people to expand their mind and to realize, what else am I being lied to? How else can I take control of my life? How can I get out of debt? How can I be more healthy? How can I look into these other issues? And I think the work you're doing is just amazing, because the Pyramid Code is by far my favorite documentary I've ever seen. I've watched it multiple times, and it just never ceases to amaze me. I just love that work that you did, and I think it's hopefully helping millions of people around the world wake up.
Well, I certainly had a lot of comments about it, and the most common, we get an echo there. The most common comment I've gotten is, when people finish watching it, they watch it again. Yeah,
exactly. It's so great. So you said the Atlantis is going to be, what's it going to be called? The New Atlantis?
That's the working title now, yes.
Okay, and when is that going to be released, do you know?
Well, that's a work in progress. I was hoping to have it done by July, but there's been some delays, and it's very complicated to get editors that understand this material, and
I bet.
Animation takes a good long time. There's lots of 3D work in it, and composing the original music and that sort of thing. So I actually don't know. I'm hoping this year for sure, and I don't know.
So do you think, will that be available via Netflix, or how does that get released, or do people buy it, or what's the deal with the distribution of that?
Well, the Pyramid Code basically got stolen from under me and put on YouTube 15 minutes after the DVD came out. So I'm going to really avoid having a DVD. Yeah. We're looking at major television networks right now. I'm working with a team of very experienced producers, and Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and Gaiam TV.
Oh, right.
That's where the Pyramid Code is now, on all of those sorts of pay-per-view subscription sort of places.
That is really cool. Are you getting any blowback with, gosh, let me think about this. Well, Gaiam obviously would be open. Gaiam, for those that don't know, is a really great portal for this kind of stuff. Gaim or TV or something. People can look that up. But are you getting any kind of blowback? Are people questioning? Are you getting any kind of adverse reaction to it in the more mainstream areas like Netflix and things, or Hulu?
No, I mean, they go by numbers, and the numbers show that people are really interested in it. No. But the thing is that I want my audiences not to have to ask, how do you know, or what do you mean? because there's too many people out there that are just like, I said so, so you have to believe me, and I don't have to tell you why. You prove me wrong. And so because things are laid out in a scientific way and there's high production value and that sort of thing, and people feel good when they watch it. You see, when there's all this cognitive dissonance going on in television and movies and everything where, they want to stick an advertisement in the middle of our confusion, which is actually what public relations is. And it was Freud's nephew that started all that, Berets. So because it's not tearing people's sensibilities apart and they feel really good after they watch it, there isn't a lot of blowback at all.
That's really cool. What do you think about... What do you think about releasing? I mean, obviously, you have your the system set up for how you do these things with the success of the Pyramid Code. Would there be any benefit, do you think, to releasing it on somewhere like YouTube for free and just allowing that to go out there, or is it better, do you think, to release it on Netflix and things like that?
Well, the Pyramid Code cost me $550,000 of my own money, and I've gotten back about $130,000. So I'm $400 and some thousand. These things don't out of pocket for the Pyramid Code. So I've taken it off the YouTube, off 550 different YouTube channels that people were trying to take the branding off it, and they changed the title and they put subtitles on it and put it up in different countries. So, that shows the success and how people were interested in it, but it basically was stolen from me. So putting it up for free, it's a horrifying thought. If that's the only option, I can just lie down and not finish it. I mean, it's not fair because people think that they're paying for internet so they don't have to pay for content. But I mean, people have taken piracy to such an extreme that it's crushing most people who are doing this kind of alternative research.
Right. Yeah, it takes so much, and so I'm sure the new Atlantis is going to be just as much in terms of rate, cost, because if it's going to be the same amount of time and amount of research and editing and all that kind of stuff, I'm sure it's a huge undertaking as well.
Well, it is, and the thing is the content is more obscure and uncommon. Like people, you can't just go interview somebody and say, what did they eat in Atlantis? But I do intend on showing a lot of the different aspects of what life could have been like there based on real hardcore stuff that we found. So it's very difficult to concretize Atlantis. Yeah. But I'm well on the way to telling these stories.
That's so awesome. I know you have to run, but one quick question about Atlantis. Am I wrong, or am I just making this up? Wasn't there some mention of Atlantis from mainstream people like, some of the Greek philosophers, Plato and people like that, right? Mm-hmm.
I'm taking Plato's 32 points that he talked about and looking at different places in the world where those points are there, because people want to say it's here, it's one place, it's Santorini, it was there,
right? And
everybody's fighting over the one place it could be. But if we cross correlate all the different points that Plato made, people say, oh, there's no elephants in Santorini, so Plato made it up. Mm-hmm. Well, wait, there may be more to it than that. Mm-hmm. So, and there is, of course. And so, it's really approaching it, what Plato said from a logical research standpoint. Right.
Gosh, fascinating stuff. So I want to let people know, too, that they can help fund this new campaign that you have called, basically the sequel to the Pyramid Code, which is called The New Atlantis as a working title right now, via GoFundMe, right? That's kind of where you're making that available for people to help fund a project like this.
Yes, and any amount of help is very much appreciated. So it's gofundme.com/The New Atlantis.
That is awesome. I am so thankful for your work, and thank you for being on. I know you do a ton of interviews and you do a ton of shows like this, so I appreciate it, Dr. Carmen, so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.